Okay, hi, I'm Diane from Northampton Neighbors, who are all aging and engaging in place. Tonight is our second community forum, and this one is to focus on food security. Our panel discussion is moderated by Clare Higgins, Executive Director of Community Action Pioneer Valley. And now, hello, Clare. Thank
Hello,
you.
Diane. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's a little odd to be we know you're out there, but we can't see you. So we're hoping that we hear from you in the question and answers when we get to that point in the program. Well, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and they're each going to talk for a little bit about the organizations and what they do. And then after that, we'll have time for questions and answers. So, and I'll just say a little bit about me. I'm the Executive Director of Community Action Pioneer Valley. We're the anti-poverty agency for Hampshire and Franklin County. We do food security work primarily in Franklin County. And we have the folks that are doing lots of great food security right here in Northampton and in both in up and down the valley as well. So I'm really appreciative of this panel. I'm going to start by introducing Heidi Nortonsmith, who is the Executive Director of the Northampton Survival Center. Hi, Heidi.
Hi, Claire. Thanks. Shall I start, or do you want to introduce the others?
Nope.
Okay.
You start and give us a little bit about your organization, then we'll move to the next folks.
All right. Thanks. And thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. I'm Heidi Nortonsmith. I'm the Executive Director of the Northampton Survival Center. And just to give you a little background about who we are and what we do, and then save lots of time for questions later. So the Northampton Survival Center is dedicated to improving the lives of low-income people throughout 18 communities in Hampshire County. And we do that by providing food, healthy food, and other resources in an atmosphere of dignity and respect. That's an important part of our mission. To put food security and food insecurity in context, the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts tells us that there are over 76,000 food insecure individuals in the 4 counties of Western Massachusetts. So in Northampton alone, that's about 8% of our population, about 2,200 folks just in Northampton. I've also been asked to talk for a moment about those words, food bank and food pantry, and what the differences are between the two. So many of us are familiar with the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts that currently has a facility in Hatfield. They are our large food banking organization for the 4 counties of Western Mass. And the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts brings in millions and millions of pounds of food into our region every year. And then there are a number, I think it's somewhere around 200 or so, partner agencies, partner organizations like the Northampton Survival Center, other food pantries of various sizes. We're one of the largest, and other feeding programs, daycares and nursing homes and others that may be getting food from the food bank. So as I say, the food bank brings in millions of pounds of food. The food pantries like the Northampton Survival Center represent the last mile of that food. We get the food from the food bank and we bring it to our facilities and give it out to people. So we put it directly in the hands of people who need it and take it home and use it. So here at the Survival Center, we are serving somewhere between 3,500 to about 5,000 individuals each year. And as I say, we're putting the food directly in their hands. These are weekly access to supplies like fresh milk and meat and eggs and cheese and lots of fresh produce, as well as shelf-stable groceries of all sorts. Before the pandemic, our primary way of serving people was indoors here in Northampton and also in our satellite pantry in Goshen, Mass. But since the pandemic, we've developed 3 new modes of serving people. We're not yet serving people back in the building. And those 3 modes are drive-through or walk up if you don't have a car. So folks come to our driveway, they get on the phone with a volunteer who selects their food for them just as they did before, but it's over the phone instead of in person. But those families are going home with exactly the food that they've chosen with the help of a volunteer. We also have an online store where folks can order their food and then come during a curbside appointment and just drive up and get that food brought to their cars. And lastly, we have a very large and growing food delivery program throughout the area. We usually get somewhere around 1,000 new clients a year. And just to put it in perspective, what the pandemic brought us, in the very first month of the pandemic, we had 536 new clients just in that month. So what we used to call food visits are now food distributions, because some of them are deliveries as opposed to visiting here. Before the pandemic, there were about 31,000 food distributions. And at the height of the pandemic, it was about 54,000. And currently we're doing about 45,000 food distributions in a year's time. So that's a general overview. I think I wanted to mention, I said 3,500 to 5,000 clients. About 17% of the people we serve are seniors, age 65 and older. So that'll be my overview for now, and I'll take questions later. Thanks.
Thank you, Heidi. I do want to mention that you're going to hear about the pandemic a lot, because the pandemic had some there was additional federal and state aid to people around accessing food, and most of those are now going away. So that's an important backdrop to this conversation. Next, I'm happy to introduce Alisa Klein. She's the Executive Director of Grow Food Northampton. Hi, Alisa.
Hi, Claire. Thank you, Northampton neighbors, and to all of my colleagues here. It's great to be with you. And I'm actually going to share my screen and share some slides that I have, because I didn't get the memo that we weren't sharing slides. So Grow Food Northampton is a little bit different than a food pantry, and I'm going to tell you about what we do. Our mission is to build a just and sustainable local food system that nourishes our community and protects and enriches the earth. And I wanted to talk about what it means to be a food and farming justice organization. We recognize that the national food system, and when I say that, I'm talking about agribusiness, the industrial food system, we recognize that it's broken in many ways, and that our food and farming system in the United States exists through farming on stolen indigenous lands, land that was supposed to be designated to formerly enslaved Black people and their descendants. We recognize that our food and farming system is built on the backs of enslaved African people, and that we are dependent today on the labor of brown people, people who are migrants, who are exploited and underpaid. We also know that our food and farming systems at the national level are major contributors to climate destruction of the environment. And we also know that the global food system, and certainly the national food system, is not equitable. It ensures that people of color and poor people don't have adequate access both to land where they can grow their own food, and they do not have adequate access to local healthy food to eat. So these are the ways. These are kind of the conceptual frameworks for the work that we do at Grow Food Northampton. I'm trying to move my slides, and for some reason now they are not moving. Just a moment. Okay. So how do we address these problems? We provide access to land and nutrient-dense local food. We steward and manage farmland, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. We mobilize community members to exchange knowledge about growing food, farming, how they can participate in the local food system. And we work to dismantle the oppressive systems and structures in the food system. Part of that is shifting power to those who have been most harmed and marginalized by the conventional food system, both historically and currently. We provide land access on our community farm. We have a 121-acre community farm in Florence. Many of you probably are familiar with it and all of the fundraising that happened to purchase this community farm 13 years ago. On the farm, on the community farm, we actually lease land sliding fee scale leased land to 10 farms to grow food for our community. We have a 320 plot community garden where people grow food for themselves and their families and their neighbors. It's all organic. We offer a values-based fee structure, so a sliding fee scale so that people can grow food for themselves. We have something we call the giving garden. I don't have much time, so I'll go through this really quickly. We are also doing experimental work to identify and enhance agricultural practices to promote climate resilience and adaptation, among many other things that go on our community farm. We also have food access programs, so we ensure that people who are grappling with food insecurity have access to fresh local food. And I don't think I have time to go into each of these, but this is the list, and I can talk a little bit more about it as we take questions a little bit later on. And last, we provide community education for all ages. We have extensive programming for kids of all ages, K through 12 primarily, both in classroom and hands-on education on the community farm. And we also provide extensive workshops for adults. So that's where I'll stop and hand it back to you, Claire. And I hope that I get a chance to tell you a little bit more about all of that programming. And it's really nice to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Alisa. And I think we will have time for more questions. I think everybody's doing a good job of keeping it a good overview, and then that'll leave a lot more time for questions. So I'm going to move now to Phil Korman, who's the Executive Director of CISA. Many of us know that acronym, but it stands for Community Involved in Sustaining Agriculture. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Claire. Thanks for having me tonight. And it's great living in Northampton and talking to my Northampton neighbors. I wish I could see you all, but I'll just assume you're there. So CISA has been doing this work now for 30 years, and we're the longest running agricultural buy local in the nation. I'm really happy that I'm with my partner organizations, that we work together in lots of different collaborative ways over the years and over this year. So CISA's mission is pretty clear and simple. It is to strengthen local farms and to engage the community in building a local food economy. We have over 250 farms that are part of our Local Hero program. And those farms are ranging from Hampshire, Franklin, and Hampden counties to even some counties bordering those counties. We do statewide work, we do New England regional work, and we do work in the 3 counties of Western Mass. Our board is made up of farmers and community members, and our bylaws require that 1/3 of our board have to be farmers. I would say that the way that most people may know about CISA's work is through the Local Hero program, because hopefully when you're going to farms or you're going to supermarkets and other places to buy food, you see the Local Hero logo, which lets you know that the food you're buying is part of the harvest that was locally grown here in the 3 counties. And for farms, it enables them to market their food and their harvest to their neighbors. And then besides the 250 farms plus that are part of that program, we have another 150 businesses that are sourcing from local farms. And that would include retirement homes, universities, restaurants. So any business that may be buying a part of the harvest that's local, we want them to be held up so you know when you go to that restaurant, there may actually be local ingredients that are in the meal you're being served. But our work has really expanded over the years, and we basically help farms to keep farming. And we do that work on almost every aspect of their business. For the most part, though, we're not doing a whole lot around growing practices. We leave that to UMass Amherst Ag Extension, but we help them with the marketing part, writing press releases, their financials, helping them write grants to secure funds. And the list goes on. We're sort of like the first place that is called. And I had one farmer call us the social worker of the farming community. We've also done a lot of work in the last 2 years around the climate crisis, and we have staff dedicated. And we also have made it a high priority to work with local community groups and communities of color that are led by people of color. And we've just kind of made the commitment to be there for whatever they need. And that need, again, has ranged from how do you manage staff to how do you write grants, on and on. And we've been collaborators on grants, and we've done branding for their farmers. And so that work continues. I think that another piece of work that's is vital to us is that we work around the issues of food insecurity, or I still prefer to call it hunger. And we do that through our senior farm share program, which is in the 3 counties. It's not in Northampton because Grow Food Northampton does an amazing job with that. We started working with Grow Food Northampton years ago, and they didn't need us anymore. So we lovingly said goodbye. And so we do 700 senior farm shares, and then we do a tremendous amount of work helping farmers and farmers markets accept food stamps or SNAP, and also the state program that piggybacks on that, which is called the Healthy Incentive Program, or HIP. And we do policy work to try to keep these state programs expanding to basically heal the ties that have been broken in our local communities. And that's about all I wanted to say for now. Back to you, Claire.
Thank you, Phil. We have one more person to hear from, and that's Rabbi Jacob Fein. He's the founder and the director of Abundance Farm, which is, I think, the next door neighbor to Heidi's, to the Survival Center. So welcome, Jacob.
Thank you. Yes, we are Northampton neighbors. It is wonderful to be here. I love being a neighbor in Northampton. So Abundance Farm is a Jewish food justice farm, outdoor classroom and community building space located on Prospect Street, right next to the Survival Center and Congregation B'nai Israel. And we are just starting our 10th season. So for 10 years, we've been working to build a more generous, just, and sustainable world. And we're a project of Congregation B'nai Israel, and we work in close partnership with other organizations here on our campus, namely the Northampton Survival Center, and then there's 3 schools here on the campus, and that we work with closely, and we collaborate with many other local food justice community organizations. There are 3 kind of interconnected aspects of our mission. The first being to practice and promote food justice and food security, support food security. And then we're an educational organization, so we provide earth-based education that seeks to inspire love of the natural world, a sense of personal responsibility to care for creation, and a connection to all life. And then we see ourselves as a space that's really focused on building community, and to that end, we strive to create a radically welcoming environment that's open to everybody, that fosters community, a sense of belonging, and cultivates a greater sense of resilience. Our main site is this humble 1 acre plot here on Prospect Street. And we also grow on some nearby land. Our farming practices are all no-till farming practices that seek to sequester carbon. From roughly 1800 to 1950, our main site has a really interesting history. It was a site of the Northampton Almshouse, what they called the Northampton Almshouse, and connected poor farm that was in the Barrett Street Marsh, and adds some sense of history to the last few hundred years of how this land has been used. So it's a Jewish inspired farm, and we draw on Jewish tradition's vision of a world where the earth's resources are treated as communal resources to be shared equitably rather than to be hoarded. And we think of Abundance Farm as a kind of commons, as a community commons. And in our case, the commons is a place to come for all people invited to come and harvest food freely, to learn about growing food, to connect with the more than human world, to rest and recharge in a really beautiful place, and to meet people, to build community, and hopefully forge some uncommon connections. We try to have as few barriers as possible to engagement. And part of the gift of the geography of the farm here on Prospect Street is that a lot of people happen upon this place. And we try to really make it welcoming, as I said, and no one needs permission, can come to the farm really at any point. No one's asked any questions, or no background is assumed, and folks can stay as long as they wish. There's no rush. Increasingly over the years, more and more people in our city and beyond have kind of found the farm to be a place to really recharge and have been a place of respite, especially over the last few years. Our main program areas that maybe I'll have a chance to speak a little bit more about later, but is this pick your own community harvest program. So everything that we grow is free to everybody and anybody. And that's a pick your own program. We grow a rich diversity of vegetables, flowers, herbs, fruit. We have a program called Shared Abundance Gardens that we started during the pandemic and now continue to operate. That's a program to help people to grow and share food out in the community at home. We've helped a few hundred gardens start throughout the city and mainly in this county, but also some beyond it. We operate a paid teen internship that's called Shefa, that is the word abundance in Hebrew. And that's a year-round paid teen internship open to all teens to learn how to grow food and learn about issues of food justice. And then we run campus education on the farm for these 3 schools and host all kinds of community events through the year and skill building workshops, and operate a wood-fired bakery on the farm. And the last thing I'll just share here is that some folks may have heard that that we recently were able to purchase the abutting 2.5 acre property that was the site of the Northampton Water Department, most recently city property that is right next door to the farm, and lots of exciting plans for farm expansion, and something that we're focusing on right now is we're building a community kitchen that will hopefully be a really tremendous resource for the city. And really exciting plans for deepening our partnership with the Survival Center through that kitchen, among other ideas, and look forward to dreaming of ways with all of our Northampton neighbors of how that can be a really great resource.
Thank you. So we had a conversation. The rabbi mentioned he hoped he had a chance to talk a little bit more about what they're doing, but one of our first questions was going to be, what's your unique special niche to the local food system? But I actually feel like everybody really kind of answered that in the introductory remarks. So I'm wondering if we could move to the next question is, could you each sort of say, what's the one question you get asked most frequently by the community? And maybe we'll go in, we can pull everybody onto the screen maybe, and you can just all answer have a little conversation about it. Can we fit Phil, or maybe take me off? There we go. Okay, great. Anybody want to start on that? The question that you get asked the most. Phil, you look like you're...
Sure. So if it's the community asking the question right now in time would be, when and where can I get fresh asparagus? So, and the answer is, like, I know today Millstone has it in Sunderland, but I assume that very soon the Tuesday market will have it. So we get questions all the time about different kinds of food and what farmers markets and what farms have it. And we have an online guide on our website that you can go searching for yourself and find it, though we love getting those questions.
Anybody else want to take a bite of that? No pun intended.
I
Go
could,
for it. Yeah,
I
go
could
ahead.
say a couple things. People ask how they can get involved in our programs, from the community garden to the snap match program that we do at Tuesday Market and Winter Market. And all of the answers, of course, can be found online. But in terms of the community garden, we do have a wait list every year. I know we have a really extensive one this year. I think the pandemic really kind of motivated people. People understood that in order to have access to fresh produce, that they had to grow their own. And so there's been much more interest in the community garden. But you can sign up online and you can get onto that wait list. And the earlier, the better, of course. And our Snap Match program, which offers double your spending power at the Tuesday Market and the Winter Market that we own and operate. You can simply come to the market, come to what we call the market tent right at the entrance to the market, and get your Snap Match. So you can double the amount of SNAP, up to $10 that you spend on produce. And it actually allows your HIP, if you also use HIP, which you should if you're on SNAP, you actually can spend even more than double, because you can spend your HIP on produce, and then you can spend your extra Snap Match funds on all the farm products that we have at the market.
Does somebody want to take a 2-second or maybe a little bit more to just explain SNAP? Because we can't assume that everybody that's on this webinar really might understand that. So it might be useful.
If someone explains SNAP, I'll explain HIP.
Okay. Heidi, do you want to take on SNAP? And then you
Sure.
can answer the other question, but I just think it would be good
Yeah.
to get that background information.
Right. I think those acronyms need explanation. SNAP
Right.
is simply just what many of us grew up or understood to be called food stamps for many years. And now it's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And HIP is, Phil?
The Healthy Incentive Program. So that's a state-funded program that piggybacks on food stamps, or SNAP, and it provides a minimum of $40, basically free produce when bought from a local farmer or farmer's market. So you take your SNAP card, which looks like any credit card or debit card, you buy your 10 pounds of carrots, and automatically you get a HIP benefit, and it doesn't cost you anything for the $10. It goes back into your SNAP account.
Thank you for explaining what I was talking about in the after I finished talking about it.
So Heidi, do you want to now take a question about what you get asked most frequently?
I'd love to, yeah. It's quite different from what Alisa and Phil talked about, but I'd say the most common question to the Northampton Survival Center in the last year or so has been, what is the effect of inflation on client numbers? And I'm sorry to say that my answer is really unsatisfying, because the answer is there is no straight correlation that I can make for people. I can't just paint a picture and say, oh, because of this, because as we all know, what we've been living through these last few years, and maybe things will be settling down a bit, but there's COVID, and there is unemployment, and there are evictions, and then there's the CARES Act, and there's ARPA, and there's COVID SNAP, and there's stimulus checks, but then there's supply chain issues, and there's gas prices, and there's inflation and war and food shortages and recession. And then there's the end of pandemic benefits, and there's SNAP emergency allotments that are hopefully making their way, and the reinstatement of universal school meals programs and so forth. Just endless sort of ups and downs as we all experience the buffeting in our own lives. That is being felt on an individual level for everybody, including people who need to access food through a food pantry. And so we see huge, vast swells and ebbs and flows of client need and client numbers. And we really can't paint that picture for folks in an easy way, except to say that, whatever you're experiencing in your own home economy, your own worries and your own concerns, for folks who really are wondering where their next meal is coming from, or how to feed their kids the next day, those questions, those concerns can feel, of course, very, very close to home, and even just the weight and the oppressiveness of that concern is felt in those families. So, and many here, I'm sure, experience that themselves. So I'll just also say, Phil mentioned earlier food insecurity, and I think you said, Phil, I like to say hunger, and there are different philosophical reasons for using those different phrases. On the receiving end of lots and lots of food donations, I will say sometimes that we focus on food insecurity as opposed to hunger, because it helps inform what kinds of donations are helpful at a food pantry. When I started here at Survival Center many years ago, we would sometimes get donations of like the last 10th of a box of pasta, opened and sitting out in the rain when we got here. And we kind of understood that when people are concerned about their neighbors being hungry, as in they're starving, that last bit of pasta in the box might be an appropriate donation. That's not what we like to receive, and that's not what the message that we want to give out to the community. So we focus on food insecurity, that knowledge that healthy food is accessible that very day, but generated through food donations that come in a more respectful, closed packages, unexpired food expiration dates, and so forth.
Rabbi.
Sure. Yeah, some of the questions that we get asked are, who is this for? Like who am I? Is this food really free? And am I allowed to be here? And the answer is always yes, and this is for everybody. And yes, it really is free. And then we tried to, help people. A big part of our work, and I've talked with Heidi about this for 10 years now, is like, how do we relate to a piece of land like as a commons, and then what can we do to help everybody relate to it that way? What can we do such that people who come to the farm, over time really see themselves as part of the community and see it not as a handout, not as like charity, but as like something that they're entitled to as a resource, as much as anybody else. And that's a big part of, year in and year out, how we as a staff, and then we have an advisory board comprised of people who are involved in the life of the farm as participants and pick your own, helping us to think, how can this be a place that really centers the dignity of all people? So, and then we have questions of like, how much can I harvest? Is there a limit? And, we really, as much as possible, just to let it all be self-regulated. So I'll just pause there.
Alisa, did you have anything you wanted to add there, or did you? No,
I answered that question.
I thought so. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something there. Can I, I'm going to go to this, another question, and then we have a couple questions in the Q&A. So what is the thing your organization does that you think brings the most joy to your constituents, or the people that come to your whatever it is you're doing, and then also the people that are working there? What is the thing that brings the most joy? Somebody want to jump in on the joy question? We're talking about a pretty heavy topic, but I think there are moments of joy. So Heidi.
I always want to talk about joy. There is so much joy at the Northampton Survival Center. I got to say, it's a really happy place. And I think that one of the things that brings me the most joy, because I hear it in others, is the real personal connection and attention to individual need and individual humanity, even in the midst of all the flurry and change of the pandemic and these crazy new modes that we've developed. Every day I'm hearing my staff, either through one ear, hearing my staff down the hall, or my other ear, hearing clients and volunteers together in the driveway, just interacting around food and around abundance and around caring and concern. And so, that might be somebody taking an order for a delivery where I hear that the person on the phone is expressing a strong desire that the bananas that might come would be on the green side. And I think, I can't believe in the midst of a pandemic, we built a delivery program where we can take that level of specificity and care in what we're bringing to people. Or outside, I'm hearing people enthusing about what they've just collected over at Abundance Farm. And, I can't believe I was just picking, such and such vegetable from my homeland, and I didn't expect to see it growing in my own neighborhood. And they've got an armload of it, and they're so excited, and they're telling the volunteer about their recipe and their traditions. And that's just a very joyful thing.
Anybody else?
I can jump in there. Yeah, I think that, folks who come to Abundance Farm have all different kinds of backgrounds. It's incredible diversity. And you have some folks who are coming to harvest where I think in the category that Heidi was just referencing, who come from places around the world, maybe where they really had been grown up in agriculture, had gardens, and have been disconnected from that for many years. And it's tremendously joyful to observe other people's joy in feeling reconnected with the earth, with land, with harvesting food, and in some cases with specific crops that they've really missed, that we're able to help them be able to reconnect with by growing those foods. And it's equally joyful to observe people, maybe a bigger category is folks who have who've never harvested anything in their lives and have no idea where, how a carrot comes out of the earth or what potatoes look like, as a plant. And I remember my own experience when I was getting into agriculture of having those moments and that is profoundly joyful to help create to see people have their worlds really opened up and their hearts opened up as they're involved in growing their own food.
Yeah, I can kind of build on both of those joyful experiences. I mentioned that we lease land to 10 farms to grow food for our community. And we have prioritized leasing land to those who have been kind of shut out of access to land to grow. And we prioritize people of color, refugees, and immigrants, and we offer this sliding fee scale from $0 to market rates for land leasing. And we have several farms that have taken advantage of that sliding fee scale and have absolutely free access to land to grow. One of the farms is a collective called New Family Collective of 20 Somali Bantu refugee families who come to Grow Food Northampton's community farm to farm for their community. They also are becoming more and more retail oriented. So they're selling at farmers markets, both in Springfield and West Springfield, what they grow on the community farm. We have one of my favorite stories is somebody who worked for 30 years as a laborer on other people's farms. And he, at a certain point, he's a man from Jamaica, he decided that he wanted to own his own farm and not work for other farms anymore. And he leases land from us with a very low cost lease and has become quite successful as a retail farmer. You can buy his produce at the co-op, at Atkins Farm, all kinds of places. And he's able to do that because we have this community farm, kind of commons, as Rabbi Jacob was calling it, that allows him to have access to farmland. In Massachusetts, we've lost 75%, more than 75% of the farmland in the Commonwealth since, I think, the 1940s. Phil, you might be able to correct my statistics on that, but there just isn't farmland for everyone who wants to farm, who wants to grow food for our community. And so to be able to offer that and to see how it allows people to become growers for our community, fresh, local, nutrient dense vegetables, is just a remarkable thing.
Great, thank you. I'll just note we have some questions in the Q&A. So Phil, do you want to add something there, and then we'll jump into those questions?
Yeah, I think, people are pretty impassioned at CISA about the work we do, and I think it's similar to every other organization here. When we're talking about food, we're talking about family and love and nutrients, and you just feel it. You feel it, and it's, on the one hand, really sad that the system's so broken that anyone should ever be concerned about if they can feed their family. And then on the other hand, when you're doing this work, whenever a connection is made, that appreciation is so deep and so strong. So we know that about 15 to 20% of the food on our plate is coming locally, and that's not enough. And we saw that through the pandemic. So I guess the joy comes from whenever a connection is made, when a farmer can finally sell to a neighbor because they're able to take SNAP or HIP, or there's now a farmer who's able to get onto land, or we help a farm get a grant and now they can expand and grow more food.
That's great, thank you. So, we have a couple questions, and some of them come together. And Kim Lambert asked a pretty long question, which I'm going to try to summarize, which is really that it's getting really hard for both renters and low-income homeowners to stay in Northampton, and talks about the valuations of property and increase in water sewer bills, and the ARPA funds weren't really given to elders and caregivers. There's a whole set of issues here. And can the city make changes to analyze how working elders and the poor can stay here? And then she does note that Aldi's food prices are pretty cheap compared to their neighbor across the street, Stop and Shop. So that actually is a pretty important frame as we think about what's happening here. And it's not unique to Northampton. As the anti-poverty agency for the region, I can tell you that's true throughout the region. The rents are not available in much of the region, not just in Northampton. And the challenges with food were exacerbated this year with the massive increase in cost of heating oil and other fuels to keep your house warm, as well as gas prices. We don't have great public transportation, which is actually a great subsidy for people living with low incomes in cities. So there's a whole set of things, but really it's driven by the national economic system that has created really inequality in our country has grown dramatically over the last 50 years, right? And so especially, starting in the 80s, and it hasn't really been able to be reversed. So we can do what we can at the local level, but we also have to really be engaged at the state and federal level. A lot of the things we're talking about here, HIP and SNAP, for instance, to directly benefit people living with low incomes and limited money for their food budget, those are federal and state funds. And so we have to fight for a fair taxation system so we can make sure we get some of that money, right? And so it's a combination of acting locally and thinking strategically on the state and national level at the same time. And that's not an adequate answer for what Kim is asking, because it's a really difficult fight, right? And it feels like we take a few steps forward and then we slide back. But that, I think it is those intersections all the way up and down. Our wages are not high enough in this region. We in Western Mass, there are the 4 counties are in the bottom 7 counties in the Commonwealth. So all of those things add in to well, our costs are not appreciably different. So all that really adds to the challenges that we have. So then somebody asked, what are the new benefits mentioned here? Helping food security. Well, the challenge with the new benefits, and somebody chime in here, I think Heidi started to talk about this. We had new benefits during the pandemic and then they went away. And so now we're struggling to get them back. And mostly they were federal benefits that we're to get back at the state level. We're asking the state to spend more on those benefits that were paid for at the federal level. And that includes seniors who are eligible for SNAP benefits, includes the school food program. We run childcare centers, and the most important thing we do on some level is feeding those children that come to us every single day. And I remember when I'd sub bus drive, the kids would talk about the meal they had on the way home. That was a really important part of the day. So those benefits we have to fight to keep on at the state level, and we have to talk to our state legislators about holding on to those, even if the federal government is taking them away right now. And that sort of answers the why. Is there a need to address food security more than ever? Anybody want to? I mean, I think that's kind of what we've been talking about, right? Costs are up. Heidi, you look like you might want to be, were you moving to unmute there?
Trying. I mean, I don't have an executive director answer to that. I have a personal answer that I think we can all answer, just casting our minds back to 3 years ago. You wanted to buy flour. You wanted to make a loaf of bread, and you couldn't find it. You could think of all the things we couldn't find on our shelves. And so a shout out to all my farmer colleagues and friends here who, pointed me in the direction of how can I buy local grain to make bread? Like we need a local food economy and system that can support, and every place does. It's not that we need it. That's what the food system should be, so that everybody has access to food, even in times of catastrophe. But any of you can say it better. I'm saying it from a personal perspective.
I wanted to just make note of the racial inequality, inequity around food insecurity and hunger. And we can talk about Northampton. In Northampton, only 3% of our population is Black, yet 24% of the food insecurity is Black families in Northampton, Black individuals and Black families. And similar to that, I can't remember what the statistic is for Latino families in Northampton, but 17% of those who suffer from food insecurity are Latino, yet their numbers are much lower in terms of the population in Northampton. So we're also seeing, there's this incredible growth during the pandemic of food insecurity that, although it's not like the height of the pandemic, but it's still very much inflated from pre-pandemic times. We're addressing more food insecurity, more hunger amongst populations of color in Northampton. And one of the things that we hear from our Food Access Advisory Committee, which is a committee that advises all of Grow Food Northampton's food access programming, is that people, poor people and people of color, people living in low-income housing in the Northampton area, want to be able to grow their own food. And that's one of the reasons, something that I didn't talk about explicitly, but that we are now doing at Grow Food Northampton, is establishing community gardens at 11 different low-income housing communities in the city. And that means we're establishing those gardens, and we're committed for the long haul to continuing to help to maintain them, teach people the skills that they need to be able to grow their own food right next to where they live. So that's kind of an exciting way to have people involved, people who haven't grown their food in the past, but who want access to healthy local food to be able to grow their own food. And that's something that can help people with, they have their benefits, their federal benefits and their state benefits, but this is a way that they can actually grow their own food.
And they often will need both of those things to have an adequate diet for their family. Jacob or Phil, do you have anything to add there? I somebody asked a question about homelessness, and I am hoping that Northampton Neighbors will do a forum all on its own about homelessness, because that's also a program that a problem that is a national in scope and is incredibly difficult to solve, and I don't know that we have time to go into all of that, but I would say that that the work that I think Jacob, you're doing with Manna, the soup kitchen, Manna Kitchen, is it you? Yeah, you're doing some work with them, right? No, or is it you, Alisa? Somebody's doing it. You're muted, so I can't tell you. I don't
We
know
have
what
something we call the Giving Garden on the community farm, where we grow about 9,000 pounds each year of fresh organic produce that we donate, and we donate mainly to Manna Community Kitchen at this point. They make meals during the growing season with the fresh produce. And we have in the past worked with the Survival Center a little bit less doing that, but we also work with, oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of the organization. I think it's getting late in the evening, with another organization that has a food pantry, food kitchen, a community kitchen that we donate food to. So that's one of the ways that we work with those, with Manna and other food pantries.
Manna is for the people on
Kitchens,
the call.
sorry.
Manna serves out of St. John's Church, and also serves, I think, one meal out of Edwards Church. And it's sort of where some of the work of the upcoming Resilience Hub is sort of starting right there at Manna. And Heidi partnered. You want to take it away, Heidi? You were going to say something about
I'm
that.
glad you mentioned that, Claire. I just wanted to say that phrase Resilience Hub because many listeners may be familiar with that or not super familiar with that phrase, but the Northampton is working on a huge collaboration called the Resilience Hub, and it features Manna. Manna right now is sort of hosting a kind of a pilot program of what will become the Resilience Hub, and many representatives of other organizations like we show up there and sort of do outreach to folks through the Manna program. But eventually it will be kind of a one-stop shopping social service resource, very broad in scope, addressing issues of homelessness and food security and such a wealth of a range of topics and needs. So keep your eyes open for that in the next year or so.
And Jacob, could you explain, somebody wants to know what the community kitchen is that you were talking about? I think that's a really interesting.
Yeah, I'll just keep it brief, but yeah, we're building this really beautiful kitchen in kind of the heart of that old water building with the support of both some state and city ARPA funds. And that kitchen is designed to both be an educational demonstration kitchen, but also a kitchen that will really be great for commercial food preparation. And we have lots of ideas that include, I mean, part of the vision was really generated from conversations I've had with Heidi. The Survival Center doesn't have a place to process food. And Heidi sometimes gets offered produce that the Survival Center can't use. So one of our dreams is to be able to really take advantage of food that would otherwise be wasted in the local food system, that raw produce that can be gleaned and that we can process and then get it to folks who can make use of it. So that's one of the ideas. I'm really excited about using the kitchen as a way to help develop some job skills for folks with barriers to entry. Really excited about like some of the work that Stone Soup is doing up in Greenfield and doing some similar kinds of things that they're doing there in that regard. And yeah, hopefully making the kitchen, it will be attractive for folks who our food-based entrepreneurs and for folks who folks who would like to offer subsidized or free space to people who are trying to incubate food businesses and maybe need a little bit of help. So those are some initial ideas.
I just note in also in the questions, Kelly Slattery from Highland Valley, she's the nutrition program director, and there's some, I don't know if the participants can see this, but she does talk about the Brown Bag Farmers Market program, and also that they serve 750 meals to people in Hampshire and Hampden counties. And Deb and Bruce was looking for resources for people who are seniors who need prepared meals. So I think the place to start is Highland Valley, but there may be other options besides that as well. And this is a good first connection around a lot of these things. And the senior center also has some advice for people on how to get those kinds of things in the Northampton area. So, and I think we have 1 minute. So does somebody want to answer the last question? What is considered a good local food system? Just, 1 minute.
I think almost every mission of the groups that are on this call describe what that beautiful local food system would be. And I just want to give a quick shout out, which is on Sunday at our Northampton Academy of Music. We're bringing field notes, which is storytelling by local people about food and farms in the Valley.
That's great. And so what I hear you saying, Phil, is it's food that is accessible, affordable, fresh, local, and nutritious. Is that
And I
right?
would just add to that, and culturally relevant.
Yes.
Does that mean I have to eat potatoes? Sorry, that was totally inappropriate. I apologize. This has been great. I hope this was helpful for the people whose faces we can't see, but it was great to see all of you and to have this conversation. Diane, do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to make?
I would like to thank each of you for joining us this evening. I certainly learned a lot. And I'm taking away like this 3D thing of dignity and dreams and diversity. And I'm going to take that forward with me. And I appreciate you inspiring me tonight that way. And I hope others too. Certainly, if anybody on this forum, I'm sorry we didn't get to see your faces, but if you have more questions or more ideas, I did put in the chat contacts to all of these organizations. Certainly, if you send anything to me at info@northamptonneighbors.org, I will forward it on to these organizations, and we'll hopefully be able to keep this conversation going. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Northampton neighbors.
Thanks.
Night.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks,
Good night,
Dan.
all.